As the United States continues to go toe-to-toe with China, there are a number of areas where people have concern. Today, we're going to dive into a couple of those topics, particularly the seas. I'm talking about the shipping of goods around the world. We'll talk about that with former Congressman Ernest Istook here today on Jimmy at the Crossroads, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, and we're at the Crossroads starting right now.
Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix, I said. Gonna talk money, gonna talk politics, great for all generations. Oh, what a great mix. I got Jimmy at the Crossroads, making sense out of nonsense. Come on, Jimmy, what you got?
Hello, my friends, and welcome to another edition of Jimmy at the Crossroads. I'm Jimmy Sengenberger, once again, coming to you in partnership with the Washington Examiner, and it is, as always, such a pleasure and a privilege to be with you today. If you have not done so already, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Jimmy at the Crossroads, and also follow me on Twitter at Sang Center. That's Sang with an E, not an A, Center on Twitter. And be sure to keep up to date on all the latest great content from our friends at the Washington Examiner at WashingtonExaminer.com. Today we're going to dive into a couple of different topics, particularly zeroing in on an issue relative to China, which is something coming up in the 2020 campaign, rightly so to be sure, and did in the recent first presidential debate between President Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. In just a moment, we will show a snippet of that encounter. But first, I want to welcome to the show former Congressman Ernest Istook, who is now a distinguished fellow at the Frontiers of Freedom Foundation. Sir, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you.
Thank you. Always great to be with you. Appreciate it, Jimmy. And I enjoyed that harmonica earlier.
Did you? You know, we like to have fun here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, so why not do our own original theme song?
Yeah. Sounds
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right, so I want to jump right in, and first, to kind of set the stage, let's play this clip from the recent debate between President Trump and Joe Biden, their first foray mano a mano, where they had this exchange on China.
It would take a miracle to bring back manufacturing. I brought back 700,000 jobs. They brought back nothing. They gave up on manufacturing. Part of my standard fare.
I'm the guy that brought back the automobile industry.
All right,
let him.
We brought back, I was asked to bring back Chrysler and General Motors. We brought them back right here in the state of Ohio and Michigan. He blew it. They're gone. He blew it. And in fact, they're going.
Ohio had the best year it's ever had last year. Michigan had the best year they've ever had.
That is not
Many
true.
car companies came in from Germany, from Japan, went to Michigan, went to Ohio.
They're not having
And they didn't come in with you.
Mr. Vice President, go ahead.
And so you take a look at what he's actually done. He's done very little. His trade deals are the same way. He talks about these great trade deals. You know, he talks about the art of the deal. China's perfected the art of the steal. We have a higher deficit with China now than we did before. We have the highest trade deficit with Mexico.
China ate your lunch, down 18%. China ate your lunch, Joe.
So that's an exchange from the debate. Former Congressman Ernest Istook, what do you make of that and the overall differences between President Trump's approach to China and the Biden one when he was VP for Obama?
Well, certainly President Trump is much more aggressive with the Chinese. Look at what he's been doing on tariffs, which is, in a sense, a retaliatory tariff, because China is using so many state-organized enterprises intertwined with the Chinese military to run commercial ventures, to buy up ports all over the world, which I want to expand on in a minute here. But China, of course, has become the #2 economy in the world. They have the second largest Navy. They have the largest commercial fleet. When I say second largest Navy, I mean the military Navy. But the commercial fleet, what people may not realize is 90% of world trade goes by ship. And when people think of China, typically they say, well, we're dependent upon China for so many of the goods that we buy. And that's true. But they miss a second point, and that's the ability to deliver the goods. That aspect of logistics, to be able to control whether goods can be delivered or not and where, is what China is working on now with what's often called the Belt and Road Initiative, or One Belt and One Road. They've been buying up seaports all over the world, because he who controls the waves can control the world as well. So I'm looking here at a copy of a Pentagon report that came out this summer. The report from the Department of Defense is a report to Congress on military and security developments involving the People's Republic of China. And just a quick excerpt from that lengthy report says that this One Belt, One Road is leveraging civilian construction for military purposes and logistics for military purposes. And when you talk about the ability to deliver goods, China this year is building about 1,200 ocean-going merchant ships. Guess how many the United States is building?
Not very many.
Eight. Another report came out this summer from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, talking about China's state-backed shipping industry, and quotes from that: state support that is unrivaled in size and scope, constructing over a third of the world's vessels, producing 96% of the world's shipping containers, and as the largest port and logistics company in the world, it's the maritime supply arm of the People's Liberation Army. Now, Jimmy, you know about the scope of the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe after World War II.
Mm-hmm.
All right. China has this Belt and Road Initiative, which is about 10 times bigger than the Marshall Plan was, where they're building facilities all over the world. They've invested in excess of $1 trillion so far. And they are, Forbes called it China's seaport shopping spree. They're buying control of ports all over the world, which means if you want to be able to have your goods delivered, you're going to have to be reliant upon the Chinese. And they have the ability. There was testimony to Congress this summer from former Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Gary Roughead, and he talked about his conversations with the Chinese, that rather than trying to sink our aircraft carriers, if they can control the logistics system, they can defeat the United States Navy. And again, it's because they have the ability to control delivery of things, not just making them, but delivering them. This is what Amazon has been doing to dominate the markets, not only the sale of goods, but now the delivery of goods, where they've got tens of thousands of trucks, all these other delivery systems, because there's power there.
Well, I want to take a step back, specifically talking about control of ports by the Chinese. How is that being done? It's through companies that are being directed by the Chinese government. And what's the significance of the ports in particular? We'll get to the number of ships and those sorts of details themselves, but in terms of the shipping ports, what's the significance there?
Great question. You're exactly right. The Defense Department issued another report to Congress this summer, identifying top Chinese companies that are linked to the Chinese military. And some of them are the shipbuilding companies and what's called COSCO, China Ocean Ventures, and so forth. Now, all over the world, they have been buying up ports. It started perhaps with Sri Lanka, where they loaned Sri Lanka billions of dollars to build a new port astride the major trade routes in the Indian Ocean. Sri Lanka couldn't keep up the payments. China repossessed it. Now they have a strategic port there at the tip of India. Same thing in Gwadar in Pakistan on the Arabian Sea, with all the importance with all the oil shipments that go through there. Loaned Pakistan the money. Pakistan couldn't keep up the payments. China reposed the port. They've got a combined commercial and military facility in Djibouti on the Horn of Africa at the southern end of the Suez Canal. On the northern end of the Suez Canal is the port that they have bought control of, known as Piraeus. Now people say, what's Piraeus? That's the port of Athens, okay? It's where the Athens Navy was situated to rule the Mediterranean when they did. So that covers the northern aspect of the Suez Canal. They've got control of ports at both ends of the Panama Canal. They just bought up control of I think it's the third largest port facility in Brazil. They bought control, and they're paying for these. Okay, they're paying for like hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars for 99-year leases. Darwin, Australia. All over the things. They've got a major interest in the port of Rotterdam, which is the largest port, the most active port in Europe. So they've been acquiring ports nationwide. The only setback they had was when the Trump administration required them to divest themselves of the port terminal facilities they had at Long Beach, California. They had to sell it off. It was about a $1.8 trillion transaction. Now, I'm just hitting some of the high points here. I've got some of this outlined in a report that's online at the Frontiers of Freedom Foundation and in other writings I've been doing.
Sure.
But
well,
again, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to shift gears over to the ships now, but I think you've
Yes.
laid out pretty well some of the factors in play when it comes to Chinese control of ports around the globe. Former Congressman Ernest Istook, our guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, distinguished fellow at the Frontiers of Freedom Foundation. Now let's talk about the ships component, because as you mentioned, we've got 8 ships that are under construction right now in the United States. We have China vastly working to expand their shipping fleet. Set the table for us.
Sure. Now, we're talking about merchant ships here.
Yep.
We're not talking about military
Thank you.
vessels, but merchant ships that deliver 90% of world trade goes by these ships, by ocean-going vessels. China is building about 1,200 a year. The United States is building 8. The only other ones that are doing significant construction are South Korea and Japan, but both of them are far beyond China in those numbers. So again, it's the ability to control delivery of things. And if they can cut you off, whether it's consumer goods, commercial goods, industrial goods, even certain military sensitive cargoes, if they can control the ability to have things delivered and you get crosswise with them, they can, in essence, deplatform you. They can say, we're not going to send your things out, or we're not going to send our things in. Again, it's the control of the ability to deliver the goods that China has seized upon as an important strategic interest that has both commercial and military components. Looking at a headline in the Financial Times says how China rules the waves. Beijing has spent billions expanding its ports network to secure sea lanes and establish itself as a maritime power. And then, thanks to the huge subsidies from government, the use of slave labor and other impressed labor, they can build more ships than the United States is doing. Now, let me give you one important aspect, though. There's some 40,000 or so ocean-going merchant ships. There's another some 40,000 ships that deliver domestic cargo within the United States on our rivers, between the port cities, along the intercoastal canal and such. One thing China cannot do is expand their control over logistics to get into our domestic markets, because we've got a law known as the Jones Act that says if you're going to be shipping between 2 U.S. ports, you have to be an American ship built in America, owned by Americans, and at least 75% crewed by Americans. Some people want to undo that law, which allows China to come in and throw money at it. That's what they've done to all these countries. They say, look, we can save you money. We can give you all this money if you'll just let us deliver things for you, because we can do it cheaper. And soon enough, you find out you're beholden to them, that not only can they do it cheaper, but now you can't do it at all because you've sold control of things to the Chinese.
So a couple of questions here for you, Congressman. First of all, when it comes to the production of these ships in the United States, what would it take to increase the number of U.S. constructed ships in the merchant fleet? For example, it seems like there's a lot of red tape. I know you're a big deregulation guy. It seems like there are a lot of red tape that can add additional costs onto the production by American companies for American ships added into the fleet. For one, I mean, that's one question. The other thing would be, some might suggest you want to do subsidies. I'm a free market guy. I don't like the idea of the federal government getting involved in subsidization of these kinds of things. So what kinds of aspects could we be looking at as far as policy changes could be to be concerned in that regard?
Great question. And like you say, what you have to do is to make it more cost effective to build things in the United States. Regulations, whether it be some of the labor laws, whether it be some of the environmental laws, all the things the United States does. And I'm not, you don't eliminate all regulations. You still have things like worker safety that are important, but you don't handcuff people. The difficult thing here is, though, even if you remove some of our internal impediments, you still have the advantage with China putting billions of dollars into subsidies each year. Other countries are subsidizing their shipbuilding too. France is doing that. South Korea is doing that. Japan is doing that. And we just had a parallel situation where it took 13 years for the World Trade Organization to say, United States, you are being cheated in the construction of aircraft, with Airbus and such getting all these public subsidies and being able to outbid Boeing, for example. So it took 13 years for the United States to establish retaliatory tariffs to counteract what they were doing in aviation. This is important here. When you have a country that is not playing by the rules because they're injecting all this government means and government money into the operation of their private enterprises, like China is doing, that's where things like the retaliatory tariffs of Trump are so important. But those have been directed at goods. They have not so far been directed at shipbuilding, and it's time that they should be.
So when you say tariffs on shipbuilding, how would that manifest itself? Is that for products that come or components to ships that come in from China? Is that what are we talking about here?
Well, it could be on the ship itself. There's a very complex system relating to international shipping through the sea on that. But there's all sorts of things when they come into port. They have to go through customs services and treasury officials and so forth, and they can be charged for something that's coming in on a ship that is part of an illegal subsidy program. So that's where it gets passed along from the ship into the cargo through that means.
Interesting. So when you're talking about the United States only producing 8 more ships right now, constructing 8 more for the merchant fleet,
right?
China
of this
about
caliber. Yeah.
How many is China doing right now?
1,200.
1,200. So okay.
1,200 a year.
In terms of that differential, one thing though, you mentioned Japan and South Korea, and there are a few other countries that have a heck of a lot of ships that are out on the seas and the merchant fleet that are American allies, frankly. So when we're talking about the United States versus China, one country to one country, I don't know that that's a complete comparison when we should also be looking at allied countries to the United States that we can trust and have confidence in that can, when you add up the numbers, be more competitive with China.
Well, you're exactly right that sometimes the unfair competition comes from other countries that are allies in many ways. That's why I mentioned the World Trade Organization ruling on the what was happening with European subsidies on Airbus, and we have
actually to clarify what I mean is that
our allies too.
Yeah. So what I mean actually is that if the United States constructing 8, and China's got a significantly larger number, but we have these allies that are also significant numbers in the fleet that's out there, outweighing when you put the totals together, when you put China and compare adding up the United States and our allies' ships out there, one might say that we could be a little less concerned than you're describing because America and the allied ships together are more competitive against the number of Chinese ships.
But the total number of ships being built by the Chinese is more than the combination of South Korea and Japan, our other allies, and ourselves.
How about
So
when you factor in the number of ships that are already in the fleet?
That gets really tricky. There's a real problem tracking that. There are brokers who track ship construction, which is where I've gotten the numbers of the 1,200 being built each year by China and 8 by the U.S. But once you do that, then you say, well, the vessels that are currently plying the waves, where were they built, where they crewed, you have all sorts of confusion with what's known as flags of convenience. As you know, you look on the back end of a ship, it'll say Monrovia or someplace like that. So that gets very, very tricky to track. I'd like to have a handle on it. I think it's a great question, but I just don't have enough solid information.
Yeah.
But I can tell you what the trend is.
Sure. Well, and the reason why I'm bringing that up is, look, from my standpoint, is I'm not a tariff guy. I'm not a subsidy guy. I much prefer a deregulatory regime, but also I'm not entirely on board with this idea that the United States, compared to allied countries that we can trust and count on, and are cooperative and so forth, that we need to be maximally self-reliant in these areas. And so that's what I'm saying. If there are a lot of ships out there that are American, they have the American insignia, or they are from other countries that are allied to us, I think that there's a counterbalance there to the Chinese fleet, even with the additions that they're making. And so I'm hesitant to take some of the steps that you're talking about.
Well, in the current global fleet, which is, and again, it depends on how you define things. It's about 40,000 vessels, of which less than 0.5% are American. Okay. So again, it's the question of, do we need to be totally self-reliant if we also have reliable allies? That factors in. You're exactly right on that. But the difficulty is, no matter what you do to remove costs, regulatory costs, for example, that should not exist, you still cannot fix the problem of the multi-billion-dollar subsidies where money is flowing through the Chinese military into the Chinese commercial ventures and so forth. So you can only go so far in making it up. That's why you have to say, look, we can't keep you from working internationally, but we can do something about it to make sure you don't come in and try to take control of our domestic, our internal commerce. We can do something at the interface when they arrive at an American port, as far as what the criteria and the standards are. That's, we need to focus on what we can do. But again, it is a major national security problem, just like the Department of Defense identified Costco and others as being the source of so many problems. And the report that came out this summer, they identify it and they report to Congress. So it's a question because there is so much interaction between sea lift capabilities commercially and militarily.
One more question on this topic here. Former Congressman of Oklahoma, Ernest Istook, our guest, distinguished fellow at the Frontiers of Freedom Foundation. My understanding is that the Jones Act, one thing that could be reformed in the Jones Act are some of the ship types that are allowed under that. For example, to expand the number of liquefied natural gas ships that are in the fleet and so forth. Do you think that there are some reforms to open up, going back to the regulatory question, to open up to more types of ships that we can be putting into the merchant fleets?
The problem is if you start pick and choosing the ships. I mean, we want to have tanker ships that are built in the United States. I remember went to the Avondale shipyards in Louisiana a number of years ago before it closed, where it was building tankers for Phillips Petroleum, which is now ConocoPhillips. And those were perhaps the last tankers constructed in the U.S. Because the subsidies became so overwhelming elsewhere. We need policy decisions. I I was asked a couple of days ago by a Navy admiral saying, when we are exporting American products, petroleum products, liquefied natural gas, uh, crude, and so forth, why don't we require it to be in American vessels? They have a point there. These are policies that many countries have because they realize the importance of what's called cabotage, which is dealing with your internal trade that goes by ship. So we can, if we have policies that incentivize people not to sell their souls just for the dollars and let China take over everything, we need policies that encourage them for shipbuilding of all types.
Once again, Congressman Istook, our guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Very interesting discussion here on China. I want to get to one other thing. Put on a different hat.
Yeah.
I told you needed to have two hats, and you could switch.
Yes,
Take
yes.
the one off from Frontiers of Freedom Foundation, and now put on the one where you are founder and president of Americans for Less Regulation. About a month ago, you had a piece in the Washington Examiner, which really spoke to me, especially amidst COVID-19 and all the healthcare concerns that we've got, that talks about red tape in the healthcare sector and the need to scale that back. And I don't just mean some of the temporary things that the Trump administration has done and that states have done, but we really need, in my view, to move forward with greater permanency to some of these regulatory cuts to cut up that red tape. Tell us a little bit about your thinking here, because especially when we're dealing with the healthcare crisis, we need to maximize doctor-patient freedom.
You're so right. You're exactly right, Jimmy. And it's been known for years, but people don't want to do about it. You know, people keep saying, I've got a plan to deal with healthcare costs. They don't deal with the huge burden that federal regulations place on healthcare. It's been estimated by the American Hospital Association where it could be 25%, 30%, some people even say 50% of the cost of healthcare goes back to the burden of all the red tape that is required by the federal government. So people that have healthcare plans, if they want to make healthcare more affordable, don't say you're going to do it by adding government subsidies. Make it by eliminating government red tape. Now, this brand new red tape that just came out a month ago is an example of it. And this is from the Department of Human Services, Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Their own proposal says it's going to take 1,500 nurses working full time to do this extra paperwork that is going to increase healthcare costs by $173 million each day. And most of it is saying, we want, in the name of preventing COVID, we're imposing all these new red tape requirements that are carried by hospitals, clinics, medical laboratories, nursing homes.
Why?
Each week and each
What's their
day
basis for this nonsense?
Well, it is nonsense.
But why? What is their reasoning for it? Like, what do they claim?
Reasoning is, this will help us track how well you are prepared to deal with COVID emergencies. I mean, it's basically doubling the reporting and saying you can be fined $10,000 a day.
Wait, can I just
piece of paper you get wrong.
I'm sorry, can I just understand something here? You're saying that they're adding all of this red tape during COVID because of COVID that detracts from being able to treat patients who might have COVID.
You have it. And for each mistake they make, they can be fined $10,000 each day. They want real-time inventory of everything you have. You know, just take face masks. They want to know every day, send us a report how many face masks you got on hand. Okay? I mean, it's a 202-page regulation. And if you try to decipher it, and again, I'm reading from the regulation, just trying to decipher is going to cost $24,917 to $29,900 each time someone tries to figure out how much the regulation is going to cost them.
As if,
and then to implement it, it costs hundreds of millions more.
This is why I wanted to highlight this with you, because I just reading the piece in the Examiner, I was just so, my mind was boggled. But then again, I came back to, this is government. This is what they do. They get in the way of everything, of doctors and patients and businesses and individuals. all the time thinking they know what's best and should be able to micromanage.
And it adds billions of dollars. This one regulation adds billions of dollars to healthcare costs. Okay. And, they say it's going to require 3 million man hours a year for hospitals alone to do the paperwork, not even counting the paperwork that falls upon clinics and nursing homes and others. Rural hospitals are going to be especially hard hit by this. But every time you give them the wrong count of your hand sanitizer on hand, they can fine you up to $10,000 daily for each occasion of that. I mean, this is totally absurd. And, the Trump administration has been pretty good about tackling red tape, but they gave in to the bureaucrats on this one.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because they say, this is what you can say you're doing to help fight COVID. You're fighting COVID by adding red tape.
Yeah, no, what you're doing in that case is you are strangling the ability for doctors to focus on where they need to focus, which is treating patients. And it is stunning because you're exactly right, and I alluded this before, that the Trump administration has been doing tremendous work in rolling back red tape in all sorts of different areas. It has done deregulation like no previous presidential administration ever has. In fact, they even got Congress on board during the 2 years Republicans had control of both the House and Senate in rolling back permanently 15 different regulations with the Congressional Review Act in a way it had never been used ever before. And yet you have this example of the Trump administration not following through with what it has been so good at for so long.
Yeah, exactly. So they let us down on this. And again, 1,500 nurses working full-time just to do this new paperwork. So again, whether it raises the cost of healthcare, you want to make healthcare more, cut out so much of the red tape. All right, the government imposed red tape. You want to make shipbuilding more affordable, cut out the red tape. You still have the problem, of course, because there you have the subsidies overseas that you're competing with. A little bit different situation in healthcare.
At a minimum, deregulating across the board is smart, whether you're at the federal government or at the state and local governments. Former Congressman for Oklahoma, Ernest Istook, distinguished fellow at the Frontiers of Freedom Foundation, and also the founder and president of, let me get it right, Americans for Less Regulation. I love that. Great to have you on the show, sir. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Jimmy. I enjoyed it.
Good to have you. And also, I should add, himself a former radio talk show host. And I could tell because he got that voice right there. That's for darn sure. All right, Congressman, thank you so much. We'll have you back, I'm sure. Once again, Congressman Istook joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. That is it for us today here on this edition of the program, but never fear, we will be returning with more engaging, intelligent talk, saying style in partnership with the Washington Examiner. My thanks to the Examiner, our partners on the show, and to former Congressman Ernest Istook for joining us on the program. Plus, Corby Wise producing for us today from VIP Video Productions. And, of course, to you for liking, subscribing, all those good things to Jimmy at the Crossroads. Please, by the way, share our content. We appreciate it and appreciate your support. Thanks so much. Have a great day, and may God bless America.